The alarm bells rang through the halls of the Galactic Defense Academy for the fourth time that week. Commander Velnus pulled his tired body from his chair and walked quickly toward the source of the noise. His silver scales were turning gray with stress, and his yellow eyes looked like they had not seen sleep in days. What did he do this time? Velnus asked his assistant as they hurried down the long metal hallway. Cadet 13. Somehow got into the main computer room, Lieutenant Zarakol replied, her voice shaking. He has locked all the doors and changed all the passwords. The food machines are now only giving out spoiled fish paste, and every screen in the academy is showing embarrassing videos of Instructor Grimtor from his academy days. Velnus stopped walking and put his clawed hands over his face. How long has he been here? 6 weeks, sir. 6 weeks, Velnus repeated slowly. In 6 weeks, one cadet has caused more trouble than entire graduating classes. The other students are afraid to go to classes. The instructors are asking for transfers to other stations. 3 of our best teachers are in the medical bay because of his last stunt with the gravity simulator. They reached the computer room where a crowd of angry instructors and confused students had gathered. Through the thick glass door, they could see a young alien with 4 arms typing rapidly on multiple screens at once. His skin was a bright orange color, which meant he was excited or angry. The Zephyrian species changed colors based on their emotions, and orange was never a good sign. Cadet 13, Velnus spoke into the communication device. Open this door right now. The young alien looked up from his work. His face had the sharp features of his people, with large eyes that seemed to hold too much intelligence for someone so young. Why should I, Commander? So you can put me in the punishment room again? I have already counted every crack in those walls. It is boring. You are destroying academy property and disrupting the education of hundreds of cadets from across the galaxy, Velnus said, trying to keep his voice calm. This behavior cannot continue. Cadet 13 laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Education? You call this education? Sit quietly, follow orders, do not ask questions, do not think for yourself. This place is not teaching us to be defenders of the galaxy. It is teaching us to be robots. The Academy has trained the finest peacekeepers in galactic history for over 300 years, Instructor Grimtor shouted. He was a large, rock-like being from the Erganian homeworld, and his deep voice echoed through the hallway. You are just a spoiled child who thinks rules do not apply to him. The orange in Cadet 13's skin turned to deep red, which meant anger was taking over. Spoiled. You know nothing about me, Rockbrain. I have seen more of the real galaxy than any of you soft academy teachers. Velnus stepped closer to the door. He had read Cadet 13's file many times, trying to understand what drove the young alien to such destructive behavior. The boy's real name was Crix Valtoth, and he came from a farming world on the outer edge of Zephyrian space. 5 years ago, space pirates had attacked his planet. The boy had hidden in a storage container for 3 days while his family and neighbors were killed. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found him alone among the ashes of his home. Despite the tragedy, or perhaps because of it, Crix had shown amazing abilities. His test scores were higher than any cadet in recent memory. He could solve tactical problems that confused senior officers. His reflexes were faster than most trained soldiers. But all of that talent was wrapped up in anger and pain that made him impossible to control. Crix, Velnus said, using the boy's real name instead of his cadet number. I know you are angry. I know you have good reasons to be angry. But this is not the way to honor the memory of your family. The red in the boy's skin flickered, showing that Velnus had touched something deeper. For a moment, it looked like Cadet 13 might listen. Then his color turned to black, which was the most dangerous sign of all. Black meant rage beyond reason. Do not talk about my family, the boy said quietly. But his voice carried a threat that made several instructors step back. You do not know what they would want. You sit in your safe academy playing war games while real people die in the real galaxy. My family died because the Galactic Defense Force was too slow, too careful, too worried about following proper procedures. The Defense Force saved your life, Zarakol said. If they had not come when they did, they came too late. Cadet 13 slammed all four of his hands against the glass. They always come too late because they spend too much time in meetings and planning sessions and academy training. While they plan, people die. The computer screens around him flickered and changed. Instead of the embarrassing videos, they now showed news reports from across the galaxy. Pirates attacking trade ships, slavers raiding colonies, criminals taking over entire star systems while the Defense Force followed proper channels and waited for permission to act. "This is what your precious academy creates," Cadet 13 said, pointing at the screens. "Soldiers who are so worried about rules that they forget why the rules exist. You train people to follow orders, not to save lives." Velness felt a deep sadness settle over him. The boy was not entirely wrong. The academy did focus heavily on procedure and protocol. They taught cadets to be disciplined and obedient, but discipline and obedience were necessary in a military organization. Without them, armies became mobs. "Rules exist to protect people," Velness explained. "Without discipline, without order, we become no better than the pirates and criminals we fight against." "Your rules protected no one on my world," Cadet 13 replied. "Your discipline helped no one when the raiders came. Your order did nothing but create more graves." The other cadets in the hallway were listening to every word. Velness could see doubt in their eyes. Some of them nodded when Cadet 13 spoke. Others looked confused and frightened. The troublemaker was not just disrupting classes anymore. He was challenging everything the academy stood for. "Cadet 13, Velness said firmly, "you will open this door and report to the discipline office immediately. This conversation is over." "No," the boy said simply. "I am done with your punishment, rooms and your lectures and your attempts to break my spirit. I came here to learn how to fight the monsters that killed my family. Instead, you want to turn me into another mindless soldier who asks permission before saving lives." The black color in his skin began to pulse, which meant he was planning something. Velness had seen that pattern in the boy's file before. It always came right before his most destructive acts. "Whatever you are thinking, do not do it," Velness warned. "You are already facing expulsion. Do not make this worse." Cadet 13 smiled, but it was a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. "Worse? Commander, I have not even started to show you what worse looks like." His four hands moved across the controls with incredible speed. Every light in the academy went out. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making everyone grab onto the walls. Emergency sirens began wailing as life support systems went into backup mode. In the darkness, Cadet 13's voice echoed through the communication system. "Welcome to my academy, where we learn what real war feels like." Velness closed his eyes and wondered if there was anyone in the entire galaxy who could handle their problem child. In that moment, 3 star systems away, a human named Jake Morrison was finishing his morning coffee and checking his messages for new job offers. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict. Jake Morrison sat in the pilot chair of his small ship, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The black liquid tasted terrible, but it kept him awake during the long journey through empty space. His ship was old and had seen better days, just like its owner. Scars covered both the metal hull and Jake's weathered face, telling stories of battles fought and won across human space. The communication system beeped with an incoming message. Jake pressed a button and listened to a formal voice speaking, in Galactic Standard Language. "Lieutenant Morrison, this is Commander Velness of the Galactic Defense Academy. We received your name from the Human Defense Force Personnel Office. We have a situation that requires someone with your particular skills." Jake raised an eyebrow. He had left the Human Defense Force 3 years ago after serving for 15 years. Most of his time had been spent dealing with problems other people could not solve. Difficult soldiers, dangerous criminals, impossible situations. He had developed a reputation for handling cases that made other officers quit their jobs. "What kind of situation?" Jake asked into the communication device. "We have a cadet who is causing significant problems. Normal disciplinary methods have proven ineffective." We need someone who understands difficult personalities and knows how to manage them. Jake smiled. You mean you have a troublemaker and you want me to fix him? There was a pause before Wellness replied. The situation is more complex than that. This cadet has exceptional abilities, but his behavior is threatening the stability of our entire academy. We are prepared to offer substantial compensation for your services. The offer was good, very good. Jake had been living on his savings for months while looking for work. Most employers were nervous about hiring humans. They had heard stories about human soldiers and their reputation for violence. The truth was more complicated, but Jake had learned that most aliens preferred simple explanations. Send me the details, Jake said. I will let you know if I can help. The file that arrived an hour later made Jake whistle softly. Cadet 13 had caused more damage in 6 weeks than most criminals managed in years. Destroyed equipment, injured instructors, disrupted classes, hacked computer systems, and somehow managed to turn the academy's food dispensers into weapons of mass disgust. The boy was creative. Jake had to give him that. But it was the personal history that caught Jake's attention. Parents killed in a pirate raid, home destroyed, 3 days hiding alone while his world burned. Jake recognized the signs because he had seen them in the mirror 20 years ago, when he came home from his first real war. I will take the job, Jake told Commander Wellness. But I do this my way. No interference from Academy officials. No pressure to use their methods. If you want me to help this kid, you let me handle it however I think is best. Agreed. Wellness replied quickly. How soon can you be here? 3 days if I push the engines. Jake spent those 3 days reading everything he could find about Zephyrian culture, academy procedures, and the other species that made up the student body. He also spent time thinking about his own past and the people who had helped him when he was young and angry, and ready to fight the entire universe. The Galactic Defense Academy was an impressive sight when Jake's ship finally reached Nexus Prime Station. The building looked like it had grown rather than been built, with flowing curves and crystal spires that caught the light from nearby stars. Hundreds of different species worked and studied together in harmony, creating something beautiful and peaceful. That peace was quickly broken when Jake walked through the main entrance. Students moved quickly through the hallways with their heads down, avoiding eye contact with instructors. Teachers looked tired and stressed. The atmosphere felt like a military base under siege rather than a place of learning. Commander Wellness met Jake in the main lobby. The Thraxian officer was tall and thin, with silver scales that had turned gray around the edges. His yellow eyes showed the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of sleepless nights. Lieutenant Morrison, thank you for coming so quickly, Wellness said, extending a clawed hand in the human gesture of greeting. I hope you can help us resolve this situation before it gets worse. How much worse can it get? Jake asked as they walked through corridors lined with trophy cases and historical displays. Yesterday, Cadet 13 convinced 12 other students to go on a hunger strike. They claim the academy food is not fit for consumption after he modified the dispensers. Today, he somehow managed to change all the test answers in the computer system. Every student in the academy received perfect scores on their exams. Jake tried not to smile. That sounds like it would make the students happy. It would. Except he also changed the grading system so that perfect scores now equal complete failure. 200 cadets think they have been expelled from the academy. They reached a large office overlooking the main training area. Through the windows, Jake could see groups of young aliens practicing combat techniques under the watchful eyes of various instructors. The movements were precise and disciplined, but there was no energy or enthusiasm in the exercises. Where is Cadet 13 now? Jake asked. Isolation Cell Block C, Level 7. He has been there for 18 hours after his latest incident. What happened this time? Wellness looked uncomfortable. He hacked into the Academy's historical database and changed all the records of famous battles. According to our computers, every major victory in galactic history was actually a defeat, and every defeat was actually a victory. He also added footnotes explaining how each battle could have been won faster with better tactics. Were his tactical suggestions correct? Wellness paused before answering. Unfortunately, yes. Our military history professors spent the morning reviewing his modifications. His alternative strategies would have saved thousands of lives and ended conflicts years earlier. Jake nodded thoughtfully. The boy was not just acting out randomly. He was making a point about the Academy's methods and the cost of following traditional procedures. I want to observe him before we meet. Do not tell him I am here to help with his case. Just say I am a new instructor reviewing Academy procedures. That should be easy to arrange. Most of our staff assumes you are here to evaluate our disciplinary methods anyway. They walked to the isolation cells, which were more like small apartments than prison rooms. Each cell had a bed, desk, personal hygiene facilities, and even a small entertainment screen. The Galactic Defense Academy believed in humane treatment even for problem students. Cadet 13 sat at his desk, writing in a notebook with all four hands moving simultaneously. His skin was a calm blue color, which meant he was thinking or concentrating. He looked younger than Jake had expected, probably no more than 17 in human years. His face still had the soft features of youth, but his eyes held the hard knowledge that came from seeing too much pain. "What is he writing?" Jake asked quietly. "We are not sure." He asked for paper and writing materials instead of using the computer terminal. Our cameras cannot read his handwriting from this angle. Jake watched the boy work for several minutes. There was something familiar about the way Cadet 13 held himself. The straight back, the focused concentration, the careful control of every movement. Jake had seen the same posture in soldiers who were fighting to hold themselves together when everything inside them wanted to fall apart. "He is not a bad kid," Jake said finally. "He is a good kid who has been through bad things. There is a difference. Can you help him?" Jake continued watching as Cadet 13 finished his writing and leaned back in his chair. For just a moment, the boy's control slipped. His shoulders sagged and his skin color shifted to a sad gray. He looked like what he really was. A scared, hurt child trying to make sense of a galaxy that had taken everything from him. "Yeah," Jake said. "I think I can help him. But first, he needs to understand that he is not alone in this fight." Tomorrow, Jake would meet Cadet 13 face to face. Neither of them knew that their conversation would change not just their own lives, but the future of the entire Galactic Defense Academy. The next morning, Jake stood at the edge of the main training hall watching dozens of young aliens practice their combat skills. The room was huge, with high ceilings and soft lighting that made everyone feel comfortable. Different species worked, together in pairs, their movements careful and controlled under the watchful eyes of various instructors. Jake wore the standard Academy instructor uniform, a simple gray outfit that marked him as part of the teaching staff. He had arrived early to observe the normal training routine before Cadet 13 appeared. Most of the students moved with the precise motions they had been taught, but there was no real energy in their actions. Everything felt too safe, too planned. "Remember, cadets," called Instructor Grimtor from the center of the room. The large, rock-skinned Erganian's voice echoed off the walls. "Combat is about discipline and control. Follow the forms exactly, as you have been taught. Precision wins battles, not wild emotion." The students nodded and continued their careful, slow movements. Jake had seen this kind of training before in human military schools. It was good for teaching basic skills, but it did not prepare soldiers for the chaos and fear of real combat. When the shooting started, pretty forms went out the window. Survival depended on instinct, adaptation, and the ability to think fast, under pressure. A disturbance at the main entrance caught everyone's attention. Cadet 13 walked into the room, and immediately the atmosphere changed. Other students moved away from him without even thinking about it. Their conversations became quieter. Several instructors turned to watch him with worried expressions. The young Zephyrian's skin was bright orange, which meant he was ready for conflict. His forearms hung loose at his sides, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. This was someone who expected trouble and was prepared to give as good as he got. "Cadet 13, Instructor Grimtor said with obvious displeasure. "You will pair with Cadet Vex 9 for defensive formation practice." Cadet Vex 9 was a thin, nervous-looking alien from the Centaurian colonies. His large eyes went wide with fear when he heard his assignment. Other students looked at him with sympathy, knowing he was about to have a very bad day. "Defensive formations," Cadet 13 said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "Is that what we are calling it now? Standing around waiting for someone else to attack first?" His skin shifted to a deeper orange. "Real warriors do not wait for permission to defend themselves." Instructor Grimtor's rocky features hardened with anger. "Real warriors follow orders and work as part of a team. Individual glory-seeking gets people killed." "So does being too slow to act," Cadet 13 shot back. "While you are forming your perfect defensive position, the enemy is already shooting at you. Dead soldiers do not care how pretty their formations looked." The other students were listening carefully now. Some of them nodded slightly, agreeing with what the troublemaker was saying. Jake could see doubt in their faces. They were beginning to question what they had been taught. "Cadet 13, Grimtor said with forced calm. "You will follow academy procedures or face disciplinary action. We have discussed this before. What are you going to do, send me back to isolation?" Cadet 13 spread all 4 arms wide in a mocking gesture. "I have already memorized every crack in those walls. Your punishment rooms are more entertaining than these boring lessons." That was when Jake decided to step forward. He moved casually, not trying to draw attention to himself, but his human military bearing was immediately noticeable among the more fluid movements of the alien species. "Mind if I offer a different perspective?" Jake said in a conversational tone. Every head in the room turned toward him. Cadet 13's skin shifted to purple, which meant curiosity mixed with suspicion. The young alien studied Jake carefully, taking in his human features and confident posture. "And who are you supposed to be?" Cadet 13 asked. "Another washed-up instructor, here to teach us the proper way to die with honor. Name's Jake Morrison," Jake replied easily. "And you know what? You are right about defensive formations being boring." The entire room went silent. No instructor had ever agreed with Cadet 13 before. Students stopped their practice and stared. Even Instructor Grimtor looked shocked. But, Jake continued, "Boring does not mean useless. Defensive formations are not for cowards. They are for people smart enough to let their enemies make the first mistake." Cadet 13's purple skin darkened with skepticism. Easy words from someone who has probably never been in a real fight. "Prove it." Jake smiled. It was not a friendly expression, but it was not threatening either. It was the smile of someone who had been challenged many times before and was comfortable with the situation. "You want proof? Come at me with everything you have got. Use any attack you want. Show me how useless defensive tactics really are." Cadet 13's skin flashed to bright red, which meant anger and excitement mixed together. The other students backed away quickly, forming a wide circle around the two figures. Some of them looked scared. Others seemed excited to finally see their troublesome classmate face a real challenge. "You sure about this, human?" Cadet 13 asked, but he was already moving into a combat stance. His forearms gave him advantages that most species could not match. He could attack from multiple angles at once and defend against incoming strikes while launching his own. "I am sure," Jake said calmly. He did not take any special stance or raise his hands to guard position. He just stood there looking relaxed and ready. What happened next would be talked about in academy corridors for months afterward. Cadet 13 launched himself forward with incredible speed, all 4 arms moving in coordinated attack patterns designed to overwhelm any opponent. His tactics were brilliant, his execution flawless, and his natural abilities impressive even by academy standards. Jake simply was not there when the attacks arrived. He moved like water, flowing around every strike without seeming to hurry. When Cadet 13 punched, Jake stepped slightly to one side. When the young alien tried to grab him, Jake was already moving in a different direction. Every aggressive move was met with calm redirection that sent Cadet 13's own momentum working against him. Within 30 seconds, the most feared cadet in academy history was on the floor with all 4 arms pinned behind his back. Jake knelt beside him, barely breathing hard from the brief encounter. "Anger makes you predictable," Jake said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You telegraphed every move 3 seconds before you made it. Your emotions gave away, your intentions. He helped Cadet 13 to his feet with surprising gentleness. The young alien's skin had shifted to gray, which meant confusion and embarrassment. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he had no smart remarks or defiant comments. Your technique is excellent, Jake continued. Your speed and coordination are better than most trained soldiers I have known. But you fight angry, and angry fighters make mistakes. They rush when they should wait. They attack when they should defend. They try to prove something instead of just winning. Cadet 13 stared at him with wide eyes. How did you do that? I am faster than anyone here, stronger than most species. I have beaten every combat instructor in practice matches. Because they were trying to fight you on your terms, Jake explained. They met your aggression with their, own aggression. I just used your strength against you. Every force has a counterforce. Every attack creates an opening for defense. The young alien's skin was now a thoughtful blue color. That is what you meant about letting enemies make the first mistake. Exactly. When someone is angry, they will eventually do something stupid. Patient fighters wait for that moment, then take advantage of it. Jake looked around at the other students who were listening to every word. This applies to more than just physical combat. Strategy, tactics, even negotiations work the same way. Cadet 13 was quiet for a long moment, processing what had just happened. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, less defiant, more genuinely curious. Will you teach me how to fight like that? Jake studied the young alien's face, seeing past the anger and pain to the intelligent, damaged person underneath. I will teach you how to win like that. Fighting is just one part of winning. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Cadet 13 smiled without mockery or coldness. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile, but real. When do we start? He asked. We already have, Jake replied. Your first lesson is this. Real strength comes from control, not from anger. Think about that tonight. As the training session ended and students filed out of the hall, Jake noticed that several other cadets approached Cadet 13 with new respect instead of fear. The troublemaker had not just been defeated. He had been given hope that there was a better way to channel his pain and talent. Commander Velness appeared at Jake's side as the room emptied. That was remarkable, the Thraxian said quietly. How did you know that approach would work? Jake watched Cadet 13 walking with a group of other students for the first time since his arrival. Because I used to be him, Jake said simply. Angry, hurt, convinced that the whole galaxy was against me. Someone showed me a better way once, now it is my turn to pass it on. 3 weeks passed, and the academy began to notice something strange. Cadet 13 was still causing problems, but they were different kinds of problems. Instead of destroying equipment and hacking computer systems, he was asking difficult questions in class. Instead of fighting with other students, he was arguing with instructors about tactics and strategy. Jake met with Cadet 13 every morning before regular classes began. They would spar in the empty training hall, working on combat techniques that emphasized control and patience over raw aggression. The young Zephyrian was a quick learner, and his natural abilities made him dangerous even when he was holding back. Your balance is better, Jake observed as they finished their morning practice session. But you are still leading with emotion instead of thinking. Cadet 13's skin was a light green color, which meant he was tired but satisfied. Sweat covered his crystalline features, and all 4 arms hung loose at his sides. It is hard to stay calm when everything inside me wants to hit something. Why do you want to hit something? Jake asked, sitting down on a nearby bench. What are you really angry about? The question made Cadet 13's skin flicker between green and orange. He had been avoiding personal topics for weeks, focusing only on combat training and tactical discussions. But Jake had been patient, waiting for the right moment to dig deeper. I told you before, I do not talk about that. You do not have to talk about your family if you do not want to, Jake said carefully. But the anger is eating you alive from the inside. I can see it in the way you fight, the way you argue with instructors, the way you look at other students. You are not angry at the academy, you are angry at yourself. Cadet 13 sat down heavily on the floor, all four arms wrapped around his knees. His skin turned to gray, which meant sadness and confusion. For several minutes, the only sound in the large training hall was the hum of air circulation systems. They screamed, Cadet 13 said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. My family. When the raiders came, they screamed for help that never arrived. I hid in a storage container like a coward while they died. Jake had heard similar stories from human soldiers who had survived battles where their friends died. Survivor. Guilt was a common problem among combat veterans. How old were you? 12 years old in your human counting. Just a child by Zephyrian standards. What exactly could a 12-year-old child have done against armed space pirates? Cadet 13's skin flashed to angry red. I could have tried to help. I could have fought with them. I could have died with honor instead of hiding like a scared animal. You could have died uselessly, Jake said bluntly. Your family hid you because they wanted you to live. They saved your life by making sure you stayed hidden. If you had tried to fight, you would have died with them and no one would remember what happened. No one would be working to make sure it never happens again. The Galactic Defense Force was supposed to protect us. Cadet 13 continued, his voice getting louder. They had warning systems. They had patrol ships. They had all their procedures and protocols and proper channels. But when we needed them, they were somewhere else filling out paperwork. Jake nodded thoughtfully. This was the heart of the boy's anger. Not just grief over his lost family, but rage at a system that had failed to protect innocent people. How long did it take for help to arrive? 4 days. The raiders had already left with everything valuable. They took people as slaves and left the rest of us to die. 4 days, Jake repeated. That is a long time to wait for rescue. What happened during those 4 days? Cadet 13's skin turned darker as he remembered. I stayed hidden until the screaming stopped. Then I waited another day to make sure the raiders were gone. When I finally came out, the settlement was burning. I found my family's bodies and buried them with my own hands. Then I waited 2 more days for the rescue ships. Jake felt a familiar pain in his chest. He had seen too many battlefields where help arrived too late. That took courage. A scared child would have stayed hidden until someone else found him. You came out and did what needed to be done. Courage? Cadet 13 laughed bitterly. I spent 3 days crying and shaking with fear. That is not courage. Being afraid does not mean you are not brave, Jake said firmly. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified. You were a child who had just watched his world burn, and you still found the strength to bury your family and wait for rescue. That takes more courage than most adults will ever need. The young alien looked up at Jake with surprise. No one had ever called his actions courageous before. Most people focused on his survival and his trauma, treating him like a victim who needed pity. The instructors here think I am just a problem student who needs discipline, Cadet 13 said. They do not understand that I came here to learn how to prevent what happened to my family from happening to others. But you are going about it the wrong way, Jake pointed out. You are so angry at the system that you are fighting against it instead of working to improve it. Destroying Academy property will not save lives. Hacking computer systems will not stop raiders. Making other students afraid of you will not make you a better defender. Cadet 13's skin shifted to thoughtful blue. Then what should I do? Accept their slow, careful methods that let people die while proper procedures are followed? Learn their methods first, Jake suggested. Understand why they exist and what they are meant to accomplish, then figure out how to make them better. You have good ideas about tactics and strategy. I have seen your modifications to historical battles. Your alternative approaches could save thousands of lives. But no one will listen to you if you present your ideas by destroying things. You think my ideas are worth listening to? I think you are brilliant, Jake said honestly. Your test scores prove that. Your tactical innovations prove that. Even your pranks and disruptions prove that. You have managed to outsmart some of the best military minds in the galaxy. The question is, what are you going to do with that intelligence? For the first time in weeks, Cadet 13's skin turned to a warm yellow color, which meant hope and determination. I want to make sure no other family goes through what mine did. I want to build a defense force that actually defends people instead of just following rules. Then stop fighting the academy and start changing it from the inside, Jake advised. Show them better ways to do things. Prove that your ideas work. Be the kind of leader that other cadets want to follow. Over the following days, the change in Cadet 13 became more obvious. He still challenged instructors in class, but now he offered constructive alternatives instead of just criticizing existing methods. He began working with other students instead of against them, sharing his tactical knowledge and helping struggling cadets improve their performance. The other students noticed the change and began approaching him with questions and requests for help. Cadet Vex 9, the nervous Centaurian who had once been afraid to spar with him, became one of his closest study partners. Even Instructor Grimtor admitted privately that the troublemaker's combat techniques were improving in remarkable ways. He is becoming a natural leader, Commander Velnis observed as he and Jake watched Cadet 13 working with a group of younger students in the training hall. The other cadets respect him now instead of fearing him. He always had leadership potential, Jake replied. He just needed to learn how to channel it properly. Anger can motivate people, but it cannot sustain them. Hope is what builds lasting change. Jake continued meeting with Cadet 13 every morning, but their conversations had evolved beyond combat training. They talked about leadership, responsibility, and the difference between fighting against something and fighting for something. The young Zephyrian was beginning to understand that real strength came from inspiring others, not from defeating them. I have been thinking about what you said, Cadet 13 told Jake one morning after their sparring session. About my family wanting me to live. I think they would want me to help others live too. What does that mean to you? Jake asked. It means I need to become the kind of officer who arrives in time to prevent tragedies instead of just cleaning up after them, Cadet 13 said, his skin glowing with steady blue determination. It means I need to change the system from within instead of just complaining about it from the outside. Jake smiled, feeling proud of how far the young alien had come. Now, you are thinking like a real leader. Neither of them knew that their progress was about to be tested in ways that would challenge everything they had learned together. The final examination at the Galactic Defense Academy was designed to test everything cadets had learned during their training. Teams of mixed species worked together to solve complex military scenarios using strategy, combat skills, and teamwork. Failure meant repeating the entire year of study, and the pressure on students was enormous. Cadet 13 had been assigned to Team 7, along with 4 other students who had once been afraid to work with him. Cadet Vex 9 from the Centaurian colonies was there, still nervous but no longer terrified. Cadet Thexmar, a proud warrior from the Draconian homeworld, had initially refused to work with the former troublemaker, but had changed his mind after seeing how much Cadet 13 had grown. The team also included Pipcole, a brilliant engineer from the aquatic systems, and Zaravel, a communications expert from the Crystal Territories. Jake watched from the observation room as the 5 cadets entered the simulation chamber. The test scenario was a rescue mission on a hostile planet where civilian settlements were under attack by unknown enemies. The cadets would need to coordinate their different abilities to save as many lives as possible while gathering intelligence about the threat. How do you think he will do? Commander Velnis asked, standing beside Jake as they observed the teams preparing for their examinations. He will be fine, Jake replied confidently. The real test is not whether he can lead. The real test is whether his teammates will follow him when things get difficult. Inside the simulation chamber, holographic displays showed a planet surface with multiple settlements under attack. Energy weapons were destroying buildings while frightened civilians ran for safety. The scenario looked realistic enough to make some cadets forget they were in a training exercise. All right, team, Cadet 13 said, his skin a steady blue color that showed calm determination. Vex 9, I need you to analyze the attack patterns and find the safest evacuation routes. Thexmar, you and I will handle direct combat when necessary. Pipcall, work on getting the communication systems back online. Zaravel, coordinate with any civilian leaders who are still alive. The team moved with surprising coordination. Over the past few weeks, they had learned to work together and trust each other's abilities. Cadet 13 had proven himself to be a natural leader who listened to his teammates and made decisions based on their input rather than just his own ideas. Everything was going well until the simulation's central computer began making strange sounds. Warning lights flashed on the control panels, and the holographic displays started flickering. In the observation room, technicians ran to their stations with worried expressions. "What is happening?" Wellness demanded. "System malfunction," the chief technician reported, his multiple arms working frantically on repair controls. "The safety protocols are not responding. The simulation is becoming too realistic." Jake felt his stomach drop as he understood what was happening. "You mean the training weapons are becoming real weapons?" "Exactly. The holographic enemies are being replaced by actual combat drones. The environmental hazards are no longer simulated. Those cadets are in real danger." In the simulation chamber, the 5 young aliens suddenly found themselves facing genuine threats. Energy blasts that should have been harmless light shows were now capable of causing serious injury. The ground beneath their feet began to shake, with real explosions rather than simulated effects. "This is not right," Vex 9 said, his voice rising with panic. "The weapons are too powerful. The explosions are too close. Something is wrong with the simulation." "Stay calm," Cadet 13 ordered, but Jake could see the tension in his posture. The young Zephyrian's skin was shifting between blue and orange as he tried to maintain control while recognizing the growing danger. More warning alarms began sounding in the observation room. "Can you shut down the system?" Wellness asked the technicians. "We are trying, but the computer is not accepting our override commands. It is like the system is defending itself from our attempts to regain control." Jake watched helplessly as the situation in the simulation chamber became more dangerous by the minute. Real combat drones were now hunting the cadets, firing energy weapons that could kill rather than just mark hits for scoring purposes. The young aliens were trapped in a scenario that had gone from training exercise to life-or-death emergency. "We need to get them out of there," Jake said urgently. "The chamber doors are sealed as part of the malfunction," a technician reported. "We cannot open them until we regain control of the main system." Inside the chamber, panic was beginning to spread among the cadets. Pipkal had been grazed by an energy blast and was bleeding from a wound on his arm. Zaravel was trapped behind cover as combat drones circled her position. The scenario that should have tested their teamwork was now testing their survival skills. "The exit protocols are not working," Vex 9 announced, his voice shaking with fear. "We are trapped in here with real weapons and real enemies. We are going to die." That was when Cadet 13 stepped forward, and Jake saw the transformation that months of training had created. The young alien's skin turned to deep blue, the color of absolute determination and focus. All traces of the angry, destructive troublemaker were gone, replaced by a natural leader who would not let his team die on his watch. "No one dies today," Cadet 13 announced with quiet authority that cut through the panic. "Vex 9, I need you to find alternative exit routes through the maintenance systems. Thexmar, cover our flanks and watch for combat drones approaching from behind. Pipkol, despite your injury, I need you to work on the communication array. Zaravel, help me coordinate our movements." Jake felt a surge of pride as he watched his former problem student take command of an impossible situation. The young Zephyrian was using every lesson they had practiced together, staying calm under pressure, using his team's strengths effectively, and focusing on solutions rather than problems. "Listen to me, all of you," Cadet 13 continued, his 4 arms moving in precise coordination as he provided covering fire for his teammates. "This is exactly the kind of situation we trained for. Real emergencies where people depend on us to keep them alive. We are not just students anymore. We are defenders, and defenders do not give up." The change in his teammates was immediate. Vex 9 stopped panicking and began working on finding escape routes. Thexmar's warrior training took over as he moved to defensive positions. Even injured Pipkol focused on his technical tasks instead of his pain. Cadet 13's calm confidence spread to the entire team. For the next 2 hours, the 5 cadets fought for their lives while Academy technicians worked frantically to regain control of the malfunctioning system. Jake watched in amazement as Cadet 13 led his team through increasingly dangerous scenarios, using tactics that combined everything he had learned at the Academy with innovations that came from his own brilliant mind. The young Zephyrian kept his teammates organized, motivated, and alive through careful planning and split-second decision-making. When Zaravel was pinned down by enemy fire, he created a diversion that allowed her to escape. When Pipcole collapsed from blood loss, he carried the injured cadet to safety while directing the others to maintain their defensive positions. Outstanding tactical leadership, Velness observed from the observation room. He is using advanced strategies that some of our senior officers would struggle to implement. He always had the ability, Jake replied, never taking his eyes off the action. He just needed to learn how to use it to protect people instead of fighting them. When the chamber doors finally opened 3 hours later, rescue teams found all 5 cadets alive and conscious. Cadet 13 stood guard over his unconscious teammates, all 4 arms still raised defensively, despite his obvious exhaustion. Every member of his team had survived because of his leadership and their willingness to trust him with their lives. Jake was the first person through the door, and he helped the young Zephyrian to his feet with genuine respect and admiration. Outstanding work, Cadet. For the first time since Jake had known him, Cadet 13 smiled with pure satisfaction rather than defiance or mockery. Thank you for teaching me the difference between fighting against something and fighting for something, Instructor Morrison. Word of the incident spread throughout the Academy. A new legend was born, the story of how the Academy's former troublemaker had saved his entire team during a life-threatening emergency became required reading for future classes. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of a career that would make Cadet 13 one of the most respected officers in Galactic Defense Force history. Years later, when Admiral Crix Valtoth commanded his own fleet protecting civilian settlements across the galaxy, he would always remember the human instructor who had taught him that true strength came not from fighting the galaxy, but from protecting it. And whenever young officers asked him about leadership, he would tell them about the day he learned that fear could be conquered by hope, and that the best way to honor the dead was to keep the living safe.